My sister's baby shower had 89 guests. I know because she told me. She mentioned it 3 times in the weeks leading up to the event, always with that little smile she gets when she's proud of something. 89 people coming to celebrate her miracle pregnancy, the baby she'd been trying to have for 4 years. I was happy for her, genuinely, deeply happy. My 8-year-old daughter wasn't invited. The text message came through on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work finishing up paperwork at the veterinary clinic where I've spent the last 11 years of my life. My phone buzzed and I saw Bethan's name on the screen. I smiled before I even read it, because that's what I always did when my little sister reached out. I'd raised that girl, changed her diapers when I was 12 years old and our parents were working overnight shifts, held her hand on her first day of kindergarten, taught her how to French braid her own hair when she turned 10. Bethan wasn't just my sister. She was the closest thing I had to my own child before Waverly came along. The message was short, polite, almost formal in a way that felt strange coming from someone who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Hey, Corinne, just wanted to give you a heads up that the shower is adults only. I hope you understand. Can't wait to see you there." I read it twice, then a third time. Adults only. Okay, I understood. Big events can be chaotic with children running around. Bethany was 8 months pregnant and probably exhausted just thinking about the logistics. I told myself it made sense. I told myself not to take it personally. I texted back a simple response. "No problem, Waverly will hang with Deacon, can't wait to celebrate you." And I meant it. I really did. My husband Deacon is a good man, quiet, steady, the kind of person who shows love through actions rather than words. He works at the manufacturing plant on the east side of town, comes home with grease under his fingernails, and has never once complained about the life we've built together. When I told him Waverly couldn't come to the shower, he just nodded. "I'll take her to the movies," he said. "She's been wanting to see that animated one about the dogs." "You sure you don't mind?" He looked at me for a long moment. Deacon has this way of seeing things I try to hide, even from myself. "I don't mind," he said. "But I think it's strange." "What's strange?" "Your sister. This whole thing. Something feels off." I brushed it away. I told him he was overreacting. Bethan was stressed, that's all. Planning a huge event while pregnant couldn't be easy. She had her mother-in-law breathing down her neck, a husband who worked 70 hours a week, and a body that was changing by the day. Of course things felt a little off. Everything would go back to normal after the baby arrived. That's what I told myself. That's what I genuinely believed. The shower came and went. It was beautiful. Held at a garden estate on the wealthy side of town, the kind of place with manicured hedges and servers in white gloves. I showed up alone, carrying a gift I'd spent 2 weeks picking out, a handmade baby quilt from a local artisan, soft as a cloud, embroidered with tiny yellow ducks because Bethan mentioned once that she wanted a gender-neutral nursery. She hugged me when I arrived, a quick hug, the kind you give an acquaintance at a work function. Then she was gone, swept away by a crowd of women I didn't recognize. I spent most of the afternoon standing near the dessert table, making small talk with distant cousins and pretending I didn't notice how invisible I felt. But I pushed that feeling down. I always do. 2 days later, I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through my phone while Waverly did her homework at the kitchen table. The event photographer had posted the album online. I clicked through the pictures, smiling at shots of Bethan opening presents, laughing with her friends, posing in front of a balloon arch that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Then I stopped scrolling. My whole body went cold. There in the background of a candid shot was a little girl in a pink dress, maybe 6 years old, holding a cupcake. I swiped to the next photo. 2 boys around 8 or 9 chasing each other across the lawn. The next photo? A toddler sitting on a woman's lap during the gift opening. I kept swiping. My hands started to shake. I counted the children in those photos. I counted them 3 times because I was sure I had to be wrong. 12. 12 children attended my sister's adults-only baby shower. But my daughter, my Waverly, the little girl who had been talking about this party for weeks, who had saved up her allowance to buy her aunt a stuffed elephant, who had asked me every single day if she could help decorate, was told she couldn't come. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call my sister and demand an explanation. I just sat there staring at those photos, feeling something inside me shift. Something that had been bending for years finally cracked. I didn't confront her. I didn't send an angry text. I didn't post a passive-aggressive comment on social media. I wrote one email, just one. And 2 days later, my sister showed up at my front door, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. This is the story of how a baby shower destroyed my family, and how one email rebuilt it from the ground up. To understand what that baby shower meant to me, you need to understand what Bethan has always meant to me. She came into this world when I was 10 years old. A surprise baby, my mother called her. My parents had given up on having more children after me. They'd settled into a rhythm of long work hours and quiet evenings, and then suddenly there was Bethan, red-faced and wailing in my mother's arms at the hospital. I remember looking at her through the nursery glass and feeling something I couldn't name at the time. Responsibility, purpose, love so immediate it scared me. My parents worked constantly. My father, Howard, did electrical work for a commercial contractor, which meant early mornings and late nights. My mother, Jolene, was a secretary at the elementary school during the day and picked up weekend shifts at a department store to make ends meet. There was no money for babysitters. There was barely money for groceries some months, so I became Bethan's caretaker. Not officially, of course, but I was the one who woke up with her at night when she cried. I was the one who learned to make formula and change diapers and rock her to sleep when she was colicky. By the time I was 12, I could get her dressed, fed, and ready for daycare, faster than either of my parents. I never resented it, not once. Bethan was mine in a way that felt almost sacred. When she took her first steps, she walked toward me. When she said her first word, it was my name, Corinne. Or her version of it, which sounded more like corn, but I didn't care. I was hers and she was mine. Growing up, we were inseparable despite the age gap. I helped her with homework when our parents were too tired. I taught her how to ride a bike in the church parking lot down the street. I sat in the front row at every school play, every choir concert, every awards ceremony. When she got her heart broken for the first time at 16, I drove 2 hours from my community college dorm to bring her ice cream and let her cry on my shoulder until midnight. I was her sister, yes, but I was also her protector, her cheerleader, her second mother. Things started to change when Bethan met her husband, Ronan Mercer. He came from money, old money, the kind that builds gated communities and donates library wings with the family name engraved on bronze plaques. Ronan wasn't a bad person, but his world was different from ours. Country clubs and charity galas and vacations in places I'd only seen in magazines. Bethan slipped into that world like she was born for it. She quit her job as an administrative assistant, started taking Pilates classes, joined committees for causes I'd never heard of. Her friends changed. Her clothes changed. Even the way she talked changed, softening her Ohio accent into something more polished, more neutral. I told myself it was fine. People grow, people evolve. Just because my sister now lived in a house with 6 bathrooms didn't mean she loved me any less. But the distance grew. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became less frequent. When I did see her, there was always something slightly off. A flicker of something in her eyes when she looked around my modest living room. A pause before she complimented my cooking, like she was searching for the right words that wouldn't sound condescending. I ignored it. I made excuses. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then came the pregnancy announcement. Bethan and Ronan had been trying for 4 years. Fertility treatments, specialists, procedures I couldn't pronounce. Every negative test was a heartbreak. Every failed round was a funeral for a dream. I watched my sister suffer through it all, and I ached for her in ways I couldn't express. When she finally called to tell me she was pregnant, I burst into tears before she even finished the sentence. 12 weeks, she said, her voice trembling with joy. They said the risk is lower now. They said it's really happening. I'm so happy for you, I managed to say through my own sobs. I'm so incredibly happy. And I was, completely wholly without reservation. This was the baby she'd been dreaming of, the child she thought she might never have. I wanted to throw her the most beautiful shower anyone had ever seen. I wanted to fill her nursery with gifts. I wanted to be there for every moment, the way I'd always been there. When I offered to help plan the shower, she thanked me but said it was already handled. Her mother-in-law had hired an event coordinator. Everything was taken care of. Just show up and celebrate with me, she said. That's all I need from you. So that's what I planned to do. Waverly was even more excited than I was. My daughter had been asking for a cousin since she was old enough to understand what cousins were. She'd watch her friends at school talk about their big family gatherings, their holiday dinners with aunts and uncles and dozens of children running around, and she'd come home with questions I didn't know how to answer. "Why don't I have cousins, Mommy?" "You will someday, sweetheart, when Aunt Bethan has a baby." That someday had finally arrived, and Waverly treated it like Christmas morning come early. She saved up her allowance for weeks, all those crumpled dollar bills and scattered coins from helping with chores, and she asked me to take her shopping for the perfect gift. We went to 3 different stores before she found it. A small stuffed elephant, gray with soft, floppy ears and a blue ribbon around its neck. "Aunt Bethan loves elephants," Waverly said, clutching it to her chest. "She told me once, remember? At Grandma's birthday dinner. She said elephants are her favorite because they never forget the people they love." I remembered. Bethan had said that years ago at a family gathering before Ronan, before the big house, before everything changed. The fact that my 8-year-old daughter remembered that detail when I had nearly forgotten it made my heart swell and break at the same time. "She's going to love it," I told Waverly. My daughter smiled so wide I could see the gap where her bottom tooth had fallen out the week before. "Do you think she'll let me hold the baby when it comes?" "I'm sure she will." "Do you think the baby will like me?" I knelt down and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "The baby is going to love you, and you're going to be the best big cousin in the entire world." Waverly giggled. "I'm going to teach the baby everything. How to play hopscotch and how to draw butterflies and how to make friendship bracelets." "That sounds perfect." She pulled back and looked at me with those serious brown eyes that remind me so much of Deacon. "Mommy, when is the baby shower? I want to wear my purple dress, the one with the sparkles." That was when I had to tell her. "Sweetheart, the shower is just for grown-ups, but Daddy's going to take you to the movies that day, and when I get home, I'll tell you all about it." Her face fell, but only for a moment. She nodded slowly. "Okay, but you'll take lots of pictures, right? So I can see what it was like?" "I promise." She handed me the stuffed elephant. "Will you give this to Aunt Bethan for me and tell her I can't wait to meet the baby?" I took the elephant and held it against my chest, feeling something heavy settle in my stomach. Something I couldn't name yet, something that felt like warning. "I'll tell her," I said. "I'll make sure she knows." The day of the shower arrived on a Saturday in early September. The weather was perfect. One of those golden autumn mornings where the air feels crisp, but the sun still carries warmth. I spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I wanted to look nice. I wanted Bethan to be proud to introduce me as her sister. Deacon watched me from the bedroom doorway as I fastened my earrings. "You look beautiful," he said. "You think it's too much? Maybe I should wear the gray one instead." "Corinne, stop. You look perfect." I turned to face him, and I could see that look in his eyes again, that quiet concern he'd been carrying for weeks. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. Just be careful today." "Careful of what?" He didn't answer. He just walked over, kissed my forehead, and told me to have a good time. Waverly was sitting on the couch in her pajamas when I came downstairs, the stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. She'd insisted on keeping it close until the last possible moment. "You have to give this to Aunt Bethan right when you see her," she instructed me, her face serious. "Don't forget, promise me." "I promise, sweetheart." She handed over the elephant reluctantly, like she was entrusting me with something precious, which to her she was. "Tell her I love her, and tell the baby I love them too, even though we haven't met yet." I hugged her tight, grabbed the gift bag with the handmade quilt inside, and headed out the door. The venue was a garden estate called Whitmore Manor, about 40 minutes outside of town. I'd never been there before, but I'd seen pictures online when Bethan first mentioned it. In person, it was even more impressive. Iron gates opened onto a winding driveway lined with oak trees, their leaves just beginning to turn shades of orange and red. The main house was a restored, Victorian, all white columns and wraparound porches, and the gardens behind it stretched for what seemed like acres. I parked my 10-year-old Honda between a Mercedes and a Range Rover and tried not to feel out of place. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated with trays of champagne and sparkling cider. A string quartet played softly near the fountain. Women in designer dresses clustered in small groups, laughing and air-kissing like they'd known each other for decades. I spotted Bethan immediately. She was standing near the gift table, radiant in a flowing, cream-colored dress that draped elegantly over her pregnant belly. She looked like something out of a magazine, beautiful, glowing, completely in her element. I walked over with my gifts, my heart full of love and pride for the little girl I'd raised, who was now about to become a mother herself. "Bethan!" She turned, and for a moment her face lit up. Then something shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice. But I noticed, a slight tightening around her eyes, a smile that didn't quite reach all the way. "Corinne, you made it!" She hugged me, quick, light. The kind of hug you give someone you're obligated to greet but don't particularly want to hold. "You look amazing," I said, meaning every word. "How are you feeling?" "Exhausted but happy. This is all so overwhelming." She gestured vaguely at the party around us, already looking past my shoulder at someone else arriving. "Waverly sent this for you." I held out the stuffed elephant. She picked it out herself, saved up her allowance for weeks. She wanted me to tell you she loves you and she can't wait to meet the baby. Bethan took the elephant, glanced at it briefly, and set it on the gift table without a second look. "That's sweet. Tell her thank you." And then she was gone, swept away by a woman in a red dress who needed to introduce her to someone important. I stood there for a moment, holding the gift bag with the quilt, feeling something cold settle in my chest. I told myself I was overreacting. She was the guest of honor. She had dozens of people demanding her attention. This wasn't personal. I found a seat near the back of the garden and spent the next 2 hours watching my sister live a life I was no longer part of. The speeches were given by women I'd never met. The games were organized by the event planner, a severe-looking woman with a clipboard who seemed annoyed whenever anyone deviated from the schedule. When it came time to open gifts, Bethan worked through the pile methodically, holding up each item for the photographer, reading the cards aloud with practiced enthusiasm. She never mentioned the quilt. She never mentioned the elephant. I left as soon as it was polite to do so, hugging Bethan one more time at the door. "Thank you for coming," she said, in the same tone she'd used with every other guest. I wouldn't have missed it. She smiled that strange, distant smile and turned away. I cried in my car for 10 minutes before I was calm enough to drive home. When I walked through the front door, Waverly came running. "How was it? Did Aunt Bethan like the elephant? What did she say? Was the party pretty?" I forced a smile. "It was beautiful. And she loved your gift. She told me to give you a big hug and say thank you." Waverly beamed. Deacon caught my eye from across the room, and I shook my head slightly. Not now, not in front of her. Later that night, after Waverly was asleep, I sat with Deacon on the back porch and told him everything. The brief hug, the dismissed gift, the feeling of being invisible in a crowd of strangers. "Maybe I'm being too sensitive," I said. "She's pregnant and stressed. I shouldn't expect her to drop everything just because I showed up." Deacon was quiet for a long moment. "You always do this," he finally said. "Do what?" "Make excuses for people who hurt you." I didn't have an answer for that. 2 days later, I saw the photographs, and everything I'd been telling myself crumbled into dust. I found the photos on a Tuesday evening. The event photographer had posted them to a public album, probably for guests to download and share. I clicked through casually at first, expecting to feel that familiar sting of being on the outside looking in. What I didn't expect was the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my sister. The first child I spotted was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, twirling in a pink dress near the fountain. I stared at her for a full minute, convinced I was seeing things. Then I swiped to the next photo. 2 boys in matching blue suits throwing flower petals at each other on the lawn. Then a toddler, no more than 2 years old, sitting on a woman's lap during the gift opening. Then 3 girls who looked like sisters, posing together in front of the balloon arch. I kept scrolling, I kept counting. 12 children, 12. My daughter had been told she couldn't come because it was an adults-only event. My daughter had cried for exactly 4 minutes when I explained it to her, then wiped her eyes and said she understood. My daughter had saved her allowance for weeks to buy a gift that my sister barely glanced at before tossing it on a pile, and 12 other children had been there the entire time. I set my phone down on the kitchen table and pressed my hands flat against the surface to stop them from shaking. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe those were hired children, part of some elaborate entertainment scheme. Maybe they were family members of the catering staff. Maybe I was misunderstanding something fundamental about what adults only meant. But I recognized some of those kids. The little girl in pink was the daughter of Ronan's business partner. The boys in blue belonged to a woman Bethan had introduced me to briefly at the shower, someone from her Pilates class. These weren't random children who had wandered in uninvited. These were guests, welcomed, included, photographed guests. The only child who wasn't welcome was mine. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Deacon, staring at the ceiling, running through years of memories and examining each one with new eyes. Every canceled lunch, every unreturned phone call, every time Bethan had promised to visit and then backed out at the last minute with a flimsy excuse. I had accepted all of it, explained it away, told myself that she was busy, that she was stressed, that our different lifestyles made it harder to connect. I had been making excuses for her my entire life. The next morning, I moved through my routine like a ghost, made breakfast for Waverly, drove her to school, went to work and pretended to focus on charts and appointments while my mind churned with questions I didn't know how to answer. When I picked Waverly up that afternoon, she asked if she could see the pictures from the shower. She'd been asking every day since the event, and I'd been putting her off with vague promises. "Can I see them now, Mommy? Please? I want to see Aunt Bethan's pretty dress." I should have said no. I should have protected her. But I was tired and distracted, and I made a choice I would regret for months. I handed her my phone with the album pulled up. She scrolled through the photos slowly, her face bright with wonder at first. The flowers, the decorations, the elegant women in their beautiful clothes. Then her scrolling slowed. Her smile faded. "Mommy, there are kids there." My heart stopped. "I see them. That girl has a pink dress like mine, and those boys are playing on the grass." She looked up at me, her brown eyes filling with confusion. "I thought it was only for grown-ups." I knelt down in front of her, taking the phone gently from her hands. "Sweetheart, I know this is confusing. Sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense, and it has nothing to do with you. But why couldn't I go? Did Aunt Bethan not want me there?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I watched my daughter's face crumble, watched her try to make sense of something that had no sensible explanation, and I felt a rage building inside me that I had never experienced before. Not anger at Waverly's innocent question, anger at my sister for putting me in a position where I had to answer it. "You did nothing wrong," I said firmly. "Nothing. Do you understand me? This is not your fault." She nodded, but the tears were already spilling down her cheeks. That night, she cried herself to sleep, clutching a stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was a baby. I sat beside her bed until her breathing steadied, then walked downstairs to find Deacon waiting in the living room. "You saw the photos," he said. It wasn't a question. She saw them too. His jaw tightened. "What are you going to do?" I sat down across from him and let out a breath. Felt like I'd been holding for 30 years. "I'm going to write her a letter, an email, something she can read and sit with and actually think about." "You're not going to call her?" "No, if I call her, she'll interrupt. She'll make excuses. She'll cry and apologize and promise to do better, and I'll forgive her because that's what I've always done. I need her to hear me without being able to talk over me." Deacon nodded slowly. "What are you going to say?" "The truth. All of it. Every single thing I've been swallowing for years because I was too afraid to rock the boat." I went to my laptop at 11 o'clock that night, after the house was quiet and Waverly was finally asleep. I opened a blank email, typed Bethan's address into the recipient field, and stared at the empty screen for a long time. Then I started writing. I wrote about the summer we caught fireflies in mason jars and counted them until midnight. I wrote about the night I drove 2 hours to bring her ice cream after her first heartbreak. I wrote about the day she got married and asked me to do her makeup because she said my hands were the only ones she trusted not to shake. I wrote about love, real love, the kind that shows up and sacrifices and never asks for anything in return. And then I wrote about the photos, about the 12 children who were welcomed into her celebration, while my daughter sat home believing she wasn't good enough, about the stuffed elephant that got tossed aside without a second glance, about the years of slow distance that I had pretended not to notice, because noticing would mean admitting something I wasn't ready to face. I ended with one line. "I'm not angry, Bethan. I'm just done pretending this is the first time you've made me feel like I don't belong in your new life." I read it 3 times. Then I hit send and closed my laptop. 2 days passed in complete silence. I checked my phone constantly, even though I hated myself for it. Every notification made my heart jump. Every buzz sent me scrambling to see if Bethan had responded. But there was nothing. No reply, no phone call, no text message asking what I meant or demanding an explanation. Just silence. By the second evening, I had convinced myself that I'd lost my sister for good. The email had been too honest, too raw, too much. She'd probably read it, felt attacked, and decided I wasn't worth the trouble anymore. I'd finally spoken my truth, and the cost was everything. Deacon tried to comfort me, but I could barely hear him. I moved through the house like a shadow, going through the motions of cooking dinner and helping Waverly with homework while my mind played the email on repeat, analyzing every sentence, wondering if I'd gone too far. On Thursday afternoon, I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't think much of it until the doorbell rang. When I opened the front door, my sister was standing on the porch. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were swollen and red, mascara smeared beneath them like she'd been crying for hours. She was still wearing what looked like pajama pants under an oversized coat, and her hands were trembling at her sides. "I didn't read it until today," she said, her voice cracking on every word. "My mother-in-law told me to stay off my personal email until the shower stress died down. She said it would be better for the baby if I just focused on resting. I only opened it an hour ago." I stood in the doorway, not moving, not speaking. "Corinne, please, can I come in? Please?" I stepped aside and let her pass. We sat in the living room, her on the couch and me in the armchair across from her. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I wasn't going to speak first. I had said everything I needed to say in that email. Now it was her turn. Bethan stared at her hands for a long moment. When she finally looked up, fresh tears were streaming down her face. It was her, my mother-in-law. She planned everything. The guest list, the venue, the photographer, all of it. She said the children of Ronan's partners and investors had to be there because it was good for business. Networking opportunities, she called it. But when I mentioned inviting Waverly, she said outside family children would complicate the aesthetic. She said it would throw off the numbers and make the seating arrangements difficult. I felt my hands curl into fists in my lap. "And you agreed to that?" Bethan's face crumpled. I didn't fight her. I should have. I should have told her that my niece was more important than any seating chart. But I was so tired, Corinne, so exhausted from the pregnancy and the planning and trying to make everyone happy. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself Waverly wouldn't find out. I told myself you would understand. Understand what, exactly? That my daughter wasn't good enough for your party? No, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Bethan? Because I have spent 2 days trying to figure out how my sister, the girl I raised, the girl I would have done anything for, could look at 12 children running around her baby shower and not think about the one little girl who was told she couldn't come. Bethan broke down completely, deep heaving sobs that shook her entire body. I watched her cry, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just overwhelming sadness. "There's something else," she finally managed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Something I should have told you years ago." I waited. "Mom has been saying things about you for years, little comments here and there. She told me you were jealous of my marriage. She said you resented me for having a better life than you. She said you smothered me growing up and that I needed to create distance for my own mental health." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. She said I was too dependent on you, that our relationship wasn't healthy, that you tried to replace her as my mother and it was damaging to both of us. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I believed her, Corinne. I believed her because she's my mother and I thought she wanted what was best for me. So I pulled away. I stopped calling as much. I made excuses not to visit, and every time I felt guilty about it, she would remind me that I was doing the right thing, that you would be fine, that you had Deacon and Waverly and you didn't need me anymore. The room was spinning. All those years of wondering what I'd done wrong, why my sister had slowly become a stranger, and the answer had been our mother the entire time. Why are you telling me this now? Bethan looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Because your email broke something open inside me. I read those memories you wrote about, all those moments we shared, and I realized I had let her rewrite our entire history. I had let her convince me that your love was a burden instead of a gift. The front door opened, and Deacon walked in with Waverly. They both froze when they saw Bethan on the couch. Waverly's eyes went wide. Aunt Bethan? My sister pushed herself off the couch and knelt down slowly, carefully, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. She looked at my daughter with tears still streaming down her face. Waverly, I need to tell you something. I made a terrible mistake. You should have been at my party. You should have been the very first person I invited. And I am so, so sorry that I hurt you. Waverly looked at me, then back at her aunt. I made you a present, she said quietly. The elephant. Mommy gave it to you. I know, and I didn't treat it the way I should have. But I want you to know that I'm going to put it in the baby's room right next to the crib. So your cousin will see it every single day and know that their big cousin Waverly loved them before they were even born. Waverly's lip trembled. Really? Really, I promise. My daughter stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around Bethan's neck. Bethan held her tight, crying into her hair, and I watched two people I loved more than anything in the world begin to find their way back to each other. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest and most healing of my life. Bethan and I talked for 3 hours that first night after Waverly went to bed. We sat at my kitchen table with cups of tea that went cold while we unpacked years of misunderstanding, manipulation, and missed connections. She told me about every comment our mother had made, every seed of doubt that had been planted, every lie that had slowly built a wall between us. I told her about every moment I had felt invisible, every holiday where I sensed something was wrong but couldn't name it, every phone call that felt shorter than the last, every time I had cried in my car after leaving one of her events, wondering what I had done to push her away. By the end of that conversation, we were both exhausted, but something had shifted. The wall was still there, but now we could see it for what it was, and we both wanted to tear it down. The conversation with my mother did not go as well. I called her the following Saturday, after I had taken time to process everything Bethan had told me. I wanted to give her a chance to explain, to apologize, to make it right. Some part of me still hoped there had been a misunderstanding, that my mother hadn't deliberately sabotaged my relationship with my only sister for over a decade. That hope died within the first 5 minutes. I don't know what Bethan told you, but she's exaggerating, my mother said, her voice sharp and defensive. I never said anything that wasn't true. You were too attached to her. It wasn't healthy for either of you. Mom, she said you told her I was jealous of her marriage, that I resented her success. None of that is true. Well, maybe you don't see it in yourself, but I do. A mother knows these things. I felt something inside me go very still. Did you tell her to exclude Waverly from the baby shower? Silence on the other end of the line. Mom, did you know there were going to be other children there? That was Ronan's mother's decision, not mine. I had nothing to do with the guest list. But you knew Waverly wasn't invited, and you knew other children would be there, and you said nothing to me. I didn't think it was my place to interfere. I almost laughed. My mother, who had interfered in every aspect of my relationship with Bethan for years, suddenly didn't think it was her place. I'm going to need some space, I said quietly. I don't know for how long, but I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. She tried to argue. She tried to guilt me. She called me ungrateful and overdramatic and said I was tearing the family apart. I listened to all of it without responding, and when she was finished, I said goodbye and hung up. My father called me 2 days later. He didn't defend my mother, but he didn't condemn her either. That was his way. 60 years of avoiding conflict had made him an expert at staying neutral. "She loves you, Corinne. She just has a hard time showing it." "I know, Dad, but love isn't supposed to feel like this." He didn't have an answer for that. The months that followed brought slow, steady change. Bethann distanced herself from her mother-in-law's controlling influence and started seeing a therapist to work through years of manipulation. She made a point to call me every week, and not just quick check-ins, but real conversations about our lives, our fears, our hopes for the future. She invited Waverly to help decorate the nursery. My daughter spent an entire afternoon painting wooden letters for the baby's name, while Bethann watched and laughed and took approximately 200 photos. When the baby arrived in late November, a healthy girl named Gemma with a full head of dark hair, Waverly was the first person outside the immediate family to hold her. I watched my daughter cradle her tiny cousin, her face glowing with pride and wonder, and I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. "She's so small," Waverly whispered. "I'm going to teach her everything. How to draw butterflies and make friendship bracelets and catch fireflies in jars." Bethann looked at me from across the hospital room, tears in her eyes. "Just like you taught me," she said. I nodded, unable to speak. That Christmas, for the first time in years, my sister came to my house. Not the big family gathering at my parents' place, but my house. She sat in my modest living room with Gemma in her arms while Waverly showed her every single ornament on our tree and explained the story behind each one. My mother wasn't there. We hadn't spoken since that phone call, and I had made peace with the possibility that we might never speak again. Some relationships cannot survive the truth, but others, the ones that matter most, become stronger because of it. I learned something important through all of this. Silence is not the same as peace. For years, I had swallowed my hurt to keep everyone else comfortable, and all it did was teach them that my feelings didn't matter. That email I sent wasn't about revenge or making my sister cry. It was about finally telling the truth, not in anger, but in clarity. Sometimes the truth is the only thing powerful enough to break a cycle that has been spinning for decades. My daughter taught me that. When she looked at me with those big brown eyes and asked if she had done something wrong, I realized I had been asking myself that same question my entire life. The answer was always no. Some people make you feel small because they don't know how to handle how much you love them. But that is their weight to carry. Not mine. Not anymore. Bethann and I still have work to do. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, and there are still moments when the old doubts creep in. But we are trying. We are showing up for each other, and that is more than I ever thought I would have again. Last week, Waverly asked me a question while we were driving home from school. "Mommy, do you think Aunt Bethann is happy now?" I thought about it for a moment. "I think she's learning how to be, just like the rest of us." Waverly nodded seriously, then smiled. "I'm glad we didn't give up on her." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Me too, sweetheart, me too." If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever had to send a difficult message to someone you love? Did it change your relationship for better or worse? Your stories matter, and I read every single one. If you haven't already, make sure to smash that like button if this video made you feel something. It helps more than you know and lets me keep bringing you stories like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe a friend who's struggling with family drama, or a sister who you've been meaning to reconnect with. Sometimes a story is the push we need to start that hard conversation. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And remember, your truth deserves to be spoken, even when your voice shakes. I'll see you in the next one.